Um, okay, so good evening, everyone. It is Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023. Pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting of the Somerville Community Preservation Committee will be held via remote participation, and there will be a recording that will be made available as soon as possible after the meeting. Tonight's a special meeting. It is our sort of public hearing meeting. We are going to try and present some content and information to the public, and then we will be opening it up at 2 times during the meeting to hear back from people, take in questions or comments or anything that people want to share. I may make this announcement again since we had some RSVPs. We do kind of expect a few more people to be logging on. But prior to doing that, because it's a special meeting, I would like the committee members to just very briefly introduce themselves. I'm Heather Highmark. I'm a landscape architect. I'm a committee member at large, and I'm the current chair. How about Jahan?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. My name is Jahan Habib. I work at MIT in finance, and I'm also the planning board representative member to the CPC. Thank you.
David, and David, when you're done, if you could just call on the next committee member for them to introduce themselves.
Sure. Thank you. David Turin. I am on the Conservation Commission member of the committee. Laura.
My name is Laura Boretsky. I'm a community member at large, I guess it's called. I'm a grant writer, also work at MIT, and I'll pass it to Dick.
Hi, I'm Dick Bauer. I'm a lawyer, a legal aid lawyer, and I'm here as the representative of the Historic Preservation Commission. And Lydia?
Hello, everyone. My name is Lydia Lopez. I'm here representing the Office of Housing Stability. Our director could not make it today as she is in a conference at DC, and I'm here in her stead. And I was invited to join by the committee members. And I think John hasn't been called, if I'm correct.
Yes. Hi, hello everyone. My name is John Brown-Cant. I am a landscape architect, and I have just started with the City of Somerville at the Public Space and Urban Forestry Department.
Okay. And I should add, John is now our new official CPC member who is appointed from PSEF.
Welcome, John.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And I'll introduce myself, Roberta Cameron, the Community Preservation Act Manager. I am staff for the commission.
And Roberta is an important point of contact for the public with questions and grant proposals, and so she will be giving you more contact information when she does her little introduction. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Roberta to do a little CPA program overview.
Thank you. I am going to get my screen ready and then quickly share my screen.
While you're doing that, I'm just gonna let anyone who is calling in from the, so Roberta will present. We will then have a brief time to take some questions from the public, and then we'll have some more presentations. If anyone's calling in, it is hard for you to be able to get in to put questions in the chat or anything. So at any point, people can put questions in the chat and we'll try to address them during the meeting or at a collected time. Because we do want to hear from you, and we want to hear any thoughts you have about Somerville Somerville Community Preservation Committee, an act, or maybe even thoughts about how we can do these meetings, this public meeting, in a way that helps you to participate. All right.
Oh, here we go. I need to figure out how to get this to show on the correct screen. So the screen that it wants to share is not the screen that you can actually see.
We could see your slide, but we could also see everything underneath it.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's showing full screen slide, but on the wrong screen. I have several screens. That's why I'm using
Okay.
the office, but I didn't anticipate. Okay, let's see if I go. Yes. Nope.
The problem may have been that it was not in actual PowerPoint display mode.
No, it's in PowerPoint play mode. It's that I have multiple screens and it's showing on the wrong screen. So I cannot tell GoToWebinar which screen to read. But I have another option. I'm going to try another option, which is yes. Okay. This will work. Sorry, everyone. So this isn't perfect, but it will do. Can you see the screen now so that, no, okay.
There we go.
Okay. So I have it saved as a PDF. You can look at it as a PDF instead of a slide show. Okay. So just a quick overview. I know that that probably everyone here is familiar with the Community Preservation Act, but in case there are people who are watching who are not familiar with the Community Preservation Act, what it is. So Community Preservation Act is a Massachusetts law that was enacted in 2000, which enables cities and towns to raise revenue to be used specifically for open space, outdoor recreation, historic preservation, and affordable housing. Somerville adopted CPA in 2012. The sources of funding come from primarily a surcharge on the local real estate property tax. So Somerville residents are paying an extra 1.5% on top of their property tax bills. And then the city can also make an additional appropriation of funds, and both of those together are partially matched by the state. So over the history of the
Roberta, before you go on, there's a, I think that there's a full screen mode that's available in the PDF viewer. I think under View, the upper left-hand corner. Up where you were, go up to the top.
It's not
Under,
showing
right.
or advancing my slides is my concern.
Right, but under View, there should be a thing that says full screen display, I think. So
we can try that.
up, on it's full screen mode there.
It's still not showing the actual slide. So I'm going to go back to Plan C. So we'll have to look at this not in
Can you put this one now into PowerPoint display mode, which is down near the bottom right?
if I do that, it's going to display on the wrong screen.
Got it.
So this is really unfortunate. I'm going to see if I can take one moment to change which screen it's showing. This is so frustrating, you all. I don't know how to solve this problem.
Mhm.
Roberta, could you try just unplugging your laptop from the monitors and just working off of one screen?
If I unplug my laptop from the monitors, then I might be able to unplug one monitor. Maybe that's the key. No, that unplugged both monitors. Oh, wait, but when I did that, I got it on the correct screen. Okay. Whew. All right,
Perfect.
so let's try again. Now we can see it.
Yes.
Great. All right. So over the history of the CPA program, this slide shows the funds, the revenues that have been raised. And what's most interesting to me is that in the beginning, the city contributed a considerable amount of appropriation on top of the surcharge. So the property tax surcharge is in dark blue on these slides, and the light blue shows the city's appropriation. And that started with over $1 million in the first couple of years and trickled down to nothing over the last 3 years. Meanwhile, so the surcharge has been growing every year so that the total revenue has been growing. But there's perhaps a lost opportunity to be able to gain additional state match if the city were putting more appropriation into CPA. And so how can you access these funds? The CPA funds can be used for a set of uses that are determined in the state's enabling legislation. Anyone can apply who is the City of Somerville, nonprofit organizations, other government entities, or even sometimes individuals if they have a project that can provide a clear public benefit. And the project has to entail property that is owned by the applicant, or the applicant can partner with the owner of an asset that can be improved with CPA funds. The Community Preservation Committee oversees funding the use of funds for open space, recreation, and historic preservation. And the funds are given to the Affordable Housing Trust for affordable housing. So each year, one of the things that we're doing here with the public hearing is determining how is the Community Preservation Committee going to prioritize the funds. The Community Preservation Committee can determine how much funding is going to go to each of the 3 categories: open space and recreation, historic preservation, and affordable housing. The state mandates a minimum of 10% to each of those categories, and Somerville has historically opted for a higher level to each of the categories, the most recent funding allocation being shown in the column on the right. And how have we actually done with spending according to these? In this past year, we actually haven't made all of the funding decisions yet for this year because of we've had the largest amount requested in the past year, and the committee has had some very difficult decisions in determining how to allocate these funds. And so this shows what the funding would look like if all of the funds are allocated as been requested and are currently to be decided as of this evening after the close of this hearing, and assuming that City Council approves all of the funding recommendations made by the Community Preservation Committee. Over the history of the program, Somerville has contributed over half of the funds to affordable housing, about a quarter of the funds to historic preservation, and a slightly smaller amount for open space and recreation. This amount, $38 million, includes $10 million of bonds for affordable housing projects, and a $2.5 million bond for historic preservation to renovate the West Branch Library. And just going to flip quickly through these two slides, but the community preservation plan includes maps of where all of the projects are located that we can locate on a map. Most of the affordable housing projects are either citywide or scattered sites. But the projects really have been scattered throughout the city. The first map showed project by ward. The second map shows projects by environmental justice population. A map of the population in demographic categories that are defined by the federal government, showing where there's a high concentration of minority, low income, and English isolation residents. Another advantage of the Community Preservation Act has been the amount of funds that we've leveraged. Over the history of the program, CPA funds, $5 million of CPA funds for open space and recreation, or close to $6 million, have leveraged a little bit over $6 million for open space and recreation. And for historic preservation, close to $8 million have leveraged over $6 million of funds. We're still trying to comb out the data on affordable housing, but I just wanted to give some flavor of what the affordable housing figures look like. Without a tremendous amount of confidence, we'll have better data by the time we produce the report this year. Affordable housing funds for construction and acquisition have leveraged approximately $4 million per $1 of CPA funds spent. And for housing programs, they've leveraged approximately $2 million per dollar of CPA funds spent. So the next thing that we're looking to generate input for through this public hearing is to think about what are the goals that the CPA program has. So the community preservation plan incorporates some overall goals for the whole program, as well as goals for each of the program areas. I'm not going to read through everything on all of these slides, but I just wanted to give a sense of the fact that we have these goals and would invite people to use the plan to identify what those goals are. And these goals guide the committee's decisions in deciding how to allocate the funds between projects that are applied for each year. So the first two slides show overall goals for the entire program. And then the next series of slides are goals for each of the program areas: open space and recreation land. These are actually, I thought that I had changed the title of these. These are actually the goals that are included in FY23 plan, not the FY22 plan. For historic preservation and for affordable housing. And lastly, I just wanted to go over again for we will take a break to invite members of the public to share ideas and perspective on how you would like to see the CPA funds be prioritized. If you're calling in by phone, we're not able to actually see you to unmute you. So if you're calling in by phone, I would invite you to email me, rcameron@somervillema.gov, or you can call the City of Somerville City Hall, and my extension is 2527. So with that, I will hand this back. And you can, I'm sorry, I should also mention, you can also share your ideas by taking the Community Preservation Committee survey, which is available at each of the branch libraries and in City Hall. And the survey can also be accessed via our website, www.somervillema.gov/CPA. And it's at the top of the web page is a link to our survey, which is available in multiple languages as well. So with that, I will hand this back to Heather.
Heather, I think you're muted.
Yeah. Let's see if it stays unmuted. Okay. So at this point, we'd like to just invite any members from the public who have joined us, if they want to make a comment, if they have a question. We're going to follow this with 3 invited testimonies from Planning and Zoning on historic preservation, from the Office of Housing and Stability, and from Public Space and Urban Forestry, at which point we'll again take some more questions. So we're just trying to kind of get a number of hit on a number of points, but we also did not want to make people wait. So if there is anyone from the public who has a question or a comment that they'd like to share with the committee at this time, you're invited to do so. Can they raise their hand? Do you see that, Roberta?
I do not see any hands raised right now.
Okay. So we'll give people a second to see if they can figure out how to do that. And if no one raises their hand, we'll go on to the invited testimony, starting with Planning, Zoning, Historic Preservation. I think that's going to be Sarah White. Is that right? Okay, no hands?
Yes.
All right, and as always, you're always free and welcome to put things into the chat, and we will receive your input that way as well. So I would like to hand it over to Sarah White. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the CPC. Nice to see you. I'm Sarah White. I'm a senior planner in the Preservation, Planning, and Zoning Division. Roberta, I happen to send you a brief presentation. If you have it, do you dare try to share your screen again, or would you like to upgrade me so I can share mine?
I see your presentation. Okay, I'll download it. I've got this figured out now. So
okay, great. So before we get started, I understand that Roberta asked for some short presentations, and I promised and dedicated myself to the fact that it would be no more than 5 minutes. And I shall hold myself to that, and I hope that is good for you as well as the attending audience. Roberta, just let me know when you are all set.
All right, let's cross our fingers that it knows. It did it again. Okay, I'm going to do that trick again where I make all of the screens disappear and see if it will come back to the right one.
All right.
That's good.
That's it.
So you can see it?
Yes. Yeah, we
Okay.
sure can.
Great.
The scene living large right in front of us. All right, so again, I'm Sarah White. I'm a senior planner with the Planning, Preservation, and Zoning Division. I've been working with the city for 8 years now, and keep on trucking. I've been working in the field of preservation for going on 20, and I've been working in zoning for about 10 years or so as well. You want to go ahead and advance that slide, please, Roberta? Go to the next page. So what I wanted to do tonight was a couple of things. Really briefly orient both you all on the CPC as well as the audience as to who is preservation, who are we, and what do we do? Because I think that I'm not sure a lot of folks are clear. There is a difference between preservation planning and the Historic Preservation Commission. I have the good fortune of working with Mr. Bauer, who has been on the commission for many years, and so we've been working quite closely. But their job is to essentially be a quasi-judicial board and issue and grant certificates or allow buildings to be demolished or not. They have other responsibilities as well, but they are the determining body. We tend to be in preservation planning. We tend to be the policy wonks in the background work behind everything that the Historic Preservation Commission does. So we are 2 full-time staff members. We are staff to the commission, meaning that we are liaisons for them. So basically we are the Roberta to the Historic Preservation Commission. We perform a lot of regulatory analysis against state law, against local law in terms of demolition review and local historic districts. We have to really know our local architecture and what we're really looking at when we're assessing a historic building and somebody wants to make that change. We review and weigh in on preservation restrictions. We do legislative work. We work with the council. We work very closely with city councilors. We review the historic preservation proposals that come before you all. We do local historic district studies and reports. We negotiate memorandum of agreement, and we work with other boards and commissions. We are also zoning planners. So we do a lot of zoning regulatory work. So we work with the ZBA, with the planning board. I've had the pleasure of working with Mr. Habib, the UDC, and of course you all. We also spend a lot of time researching city history. A lot of times the catalyst for that is when a property comes in for demolition or when we have to create a new historic district, and we guide applicants through the regulatory process. So we wear a lot of hats, but what we try to do is we try to bring as many components of city departments together, because we really all planning and preservation and zoning, peace off and housing, we all really try to function together as a whole, as a cohesive whole. Next slide, please. So this is what we do on a regular basis, but we have a lot of dreams and desires. And so there are a lot of projects that we work on an ongoing basis and that we would like to do in the future. And one of the big things for us is conducting research and studies in order to tell the fuller story of Somerville. And this is important in many ways. You know, the history of Somerville is very rich. And it's the people who make up those stories, right? And it's the people who make up that history. It is a house, yes, but not just about the house. It's about the people who live in the house and what they've touched and what they've done and how they've contributed and who they were, how they lived, how they died, and everything in between. So there are a lot of communities who are fortunately going forward and trying to tell, a lot of times you'll hear the term the full story. And that's especially about bringing to the forefront and giving voice to communities who have been historically underrepresented, who have been lost to history because of decisions made in the past, and we need to bring those stories and those voices back to life. I believe that we can never ever tell the full story of Somerville or any community, but we can only tell a fuller story, right? Because a story is never completely full, it's always additive. Sometimes it's subtractive, right? When we learn that, ooh, something that we thought was true wasn't. So this is very important to us to really work on telling this story. Sustainable preservation. This is also a big movement and a big interest of ours. We're looking at means of encouraging deconstruction of buildings, not demolition. This goes to sustainability. This goes to zero waste initiatives energy conservation, et cetera. We're looking at adaptive reuse initiatives and really how to engage with secondary markets and highlight secondary markets for reusable building materials of many varieties. We're collaborating with Cambridge. It's been a bit in a lull recently on working on a national register district that skims the city line. And we always have historic districts that we either have requests to form or that are on our agenda to form. Next slide, please. I'm butting up against my 5 minutes, I know. So really quickly, I wanted to offer some suggestions after talking to Roberta to the CPC about some things that we think that might be helpful from a preservation standpoint, as well as an affordability standpoint, as well as a sustainability standpoint. On the left, I see your stated goals from 2023 in terms of preservation. And I'd like to offer that the CPC, in however it sees fit, do additional outreach to encourage underrepresented communities to engage with the Community Preservation Act, particularly as it pertains to historic preservation, but in all forms. But I particularly like to see these communities come forward with projects, but I'd also like to see some blended projects. And I get into that in my second bullet point. And a blended project would be something that would be historic preservation and affordable housing. It's been done before with the Mystic Waterworks. And I was just in a meeting a few weeks ago with a property owner who is interested in creating affordable housing. And the building involved is certainly a building that could be considered historically significant. These are great opportunities to reuse material that we already have and provide some unique and definitely much needed housing for populations who are desperately in need of it. And I think the last major suggestion that I would have for you is to encourage applications that really uplift and highlight the stories of immigrant and BIPOC communities in Somerville. This goes back to one of those primary research initiatives that we have going on. We don't see enough of these at all. And we are a very full and robust and unique and diverse community. And the more that we can celebrate this and express this and share this, I think that we're all the better for it. So if the CPC could encourage these types of projects, I think that that would be really really helpful and really wonderful all around. Any questions? I am here now or later. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. That was perfect, and really appreciate you taking the time to share all that information with us tonight.
Sure thing.
I think we'll go on to the next invited testimony, which is going to be from the Office of Housing and Stability. We have Linda Lopez with us here tonight to talk a little bit about this other sort of important area of how CPA funds are spent, or to educate us on her.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Roberta, I'm going to ask you to also please go ahead and share my deck if at all possible, and I'm happy to do so as well.
I can do it. I'm just going to have to do my trick again so I can get it on the correct screen.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I don't know why it has to behave like this. All right, now I can share my screen and you should be seeing your slide deck now.
Great. So I don't know if I can keep it to 5 minutes. That's a very high bar, Sarah. But I do know I have 5 slides, or 6 rather, technically speaking, 5 with content, and a lot of important information. At any point, if any of the committee members need me to stop to clarify or have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and interrupt me. I'm a very casual presenter, and I really want the time that I spend here with you all to be time that you all feel is useful and answers whatever questions you may need. So a little bit about myself. My name is Lydia Lopez. I guess I'll start with my personal hat and then go into the professional, but I actually was a former resident of Somerville. I was born in El Salvador, and my family and I had to also move out of Somerville because at the point with many stories that we hear in our office, we could no longer afford rent. I'm here in Everett now, and I've been here for a very long time, but this is what brings me to the work of housing stability. I started in the Office of Housing Stability back when it first opened, almost 4 years to the week. back with Ellen Schachter, our director, who is currently at a conference in DC, our co-deputy Susan Shameen, who is also at the aforementioned conference, as well as the other co-deputy Fred Berman. And I've been here ever since. Next slide, please. So before I go into the nitty gritty, I just wanted to give you all, oh, I'm so sorry, Roberta, if we can change it to the next slide. Thank you. So before I go into the nitty gritty, I just wanted to give the committee members an overview or a lay of the land, if you will, of all the staff in office and really point to two important things, which is the fact that most of our staff, a majority of them, speak another language other than English. And I think that this is something that underscores something that Sarah mentioned before, which is the fact that we do have a large and robust immigrant population, as well as population that's speaking English as a second language. And we found that that's been instrumental in making sure that our services, whether that be information on tenants' rights, accessing affordable housing, and able to triage, whether it be tenant organizing for building sales and or being connected to pro bono legal services to be able to meet community where their needs are. And so right now we have 10 full-time staff members, as well as 4 part-time rental assistance advocates, we call them. And these advocates started out as individuals whose only specific job role, and I say only, not trying to undervalue or how important their work is, because they primarily work with in constituents technical assistance with the myriad of rental assistance that's available either on a state or local level. Next slide, please. And so here is really an overview of the services that we provide. And I'll let you folks take the time to read and not really go into reading or regurgitating any more of the text that's in front of you. But one thing that I very clearly want to underscore is that even though our office is not a fundee or a grantee of CPA services per se, CPA and where it touches is all around us, right? And so one thing that I want to have the committee members want to direct them towards is the first bullet point when we talk about accessing financial assistance. And currently, CPA and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund programs do require something called a notice to quit and or a summons and complaint or above, right? When we say above, we mean any of the other legal processes that a tenant is faced with during the summary process, or as it's normally known in layman's term, an eviction. And the reason why I want to point this out is one of the bullets or the questions that our office was invited to answer is what can the CPC do, or what can we think about in terms of either funding sources, programs, et cetera. And one of the things that I'd like to point the committee to is thinking about the possibility of one, expansion of rental assistance programs, right? And secondly, relaxing of those programs. So what do I mean by that? I mean thinking about ways in which folks can access these rental assistance programs that may not require a notice to quit stage or stage in the sort of court eviction processes. And the reason we say that is sort of to point out, I think, what I was implying in the first slide, which is that a lot of the folks that we're seeing come to our office now who have the highest need and are the most vulnerable towards evictions are the folks that have the hardest time getting to those required documents, right? And what I mean by that is folks that are undocumented, folks that might be immigrants, and folks that might speak English as their second language, right? And although we think that you know, a notice to quit is something that starts, begins, or initiates an eviction process, in and of itself, it's already a barrier for these particular populations. So how can the committee think about relaxing those rules or expanding those rules to try and really help out the population in most needs? Now, in order, I do want to move on to the next slide, but I just want to open it up to questions on the committee before I move to the preceding slide. Okay, with no questions, next slide, please. And just like we do on the ground direct services, now I will point the committee to another arm in our office, which is the policy advocacy piece, as well as the creation of new programs. Policy advocacy is something that our office feels strongly about because this is how we plant the seeds, right, for future generation, for future change, and for future growth. And some of the things that I'd like to point the committee towards is number one, the development of something called the Housing Stability Notification Act. At the time when we first passed this bill, ordinance back in 2019, I think Somerville was the second municipality in the state to have something like. And what this does basically is just a resource guide that is handed to the tenant at the initiation of a new tenancy, as well as at the end of a tenancy, in order to provide tenants with their rights, as well as local resources having to do with either rental assistance, homelessness prevention, and or legal services. And we have found that a lot of the tenants who hear about our office and come and ask for services are tenants that have done so through the Housing Stabilization Notification Act. So it's something that I wanted to underscore as an important piece of our work. Outside of the local advocacy, our office also supports coalition building in a number of legislation in order to fund, preserve, or the creation of new affordable housing, as well as any legislation that implements and supports stronger tenant protections generally. And so an example of some of those are the transfer fee bill, rent stabilization, right to counsel, right to purchase, as well as eviction sealing. And finally, some of the services that we have created in-house in order to try and really bridge the gaps. Some of the barriers that we've seen on the ground is something called the Summer VIP. And this is an incentive program for landlords and realtors for new recipients of a mobile subsidy known quite commonly as the Section 8 program in Somerville. The Flex ARPA program, which as the name suggests, is a flexible rental assistance program. The hyphen ARPA comes specifically from the funding source that it's funded by. Third is the Flex program. Another Flex programs. We're big fans of flexibility to try and bridge the gap for any rental assistance programs that can't, whether for things like requirements based on documentation or based on things like even having to sort of prove a tenancy with a landlord. It is a barrier that we see in the office. This is a rental assistance program that tries to be all-encompassing and flexible to try and folks that are in the most vulnerable position. And finally, something that I'm very excited about, and something that you folks may or may not have heard, is the implementation of something called the Municipal Voucher Program, or MVP. At this point, we are, I think, the second in the state, Boston being the first to actually administer something attuned to a mobile subsidy program. It's currently underdeveloped, and I'll have more about it in the next slide. But before I move on, does anyone have any questions? Great. Next slide, please. And finally, I did want to give you all some general updates of what we're seeing on the ground. I think, and Roberta, correct me if I'm wrong, it's been roughly around a year since our office has been asked to be a speaker. And so if anything, if there's any pieces of missing information, please feel free to speak up. I'd be happy to look at any data points or to clarify. But broadly speaking, since then, we have currently asked for what we're calling a second round of Flex ARPA contract, essentially just asking for more money. For context, the first round of Flex ARPA happened back in late August into September of 2022, in which we asked the ARPA program managers in the city for $1 million of rental assistance in anticipation for what was then currently the biggest rental assistance program in the state, called ERAP. This was based on COVID funding, and we were anticipating its ending. And back then, we essentially, as a city, spent down those $1 million in the span of 30 days or a month. And so that's just to show you all that, number one, the demand is incredibly high. So again, bringing you all back to the first ask in the second slide about the expansion of the rental assistance program. It is something that we're seeing that families are not yet back on their feet post-COVID and are still really much looking for, that extra hand up in order to try to meet their expenses. Another thing to note is that these rental assistance programs, especially the ones that are deemed as most flexible, right, are also the ones that are easily spent down. One being for the fact that the volume is just much larger, right? When you're working with populations who don't have the ability of paying, 100% of their rent, right? You're just spending the money a lot more quickly, which in turn, or in practice, also means longer wait lists, right? In order to wait to be helped and to receive funds. According to that, even though these funds are flexible, there is still a method to this madness, if you will. There is a sort of tiered priority, and that's listed in the slide. So households who receive a summons and complaint under a summary process case receive first priority, then households with a notice to quit, and then third, households containing one or more members and eligible for federal housing assistance. And as you can see, a lot of folks, we're happy to help and to triage the folks that are in most need, right? We're currently in court battling an eviction, but we also have another big bucket, which is members who are not eligible for federal housing assistance long-term, and who most likely report needing additional funding for prospective rent, as we call it in the field, meaning months wherein rent isn't necessarily owed, it's not arrears, but there's no clear path to sustainability or to be able to pay those rents. And so in tangent to paying whatever is owed, in order to stabilize the family, you also need to provide a little bit of money prospectively, right? And so that's also a very important piece in thinking about rental assistance programs, right? How do we bake into the program a way to be able to have families who need it also gain perspective moving forward. Just very high level in regards to eviction data points. We have seen executions that have issued since 2020 to be right under 50. Right under 60, with approximately around 8 new evictions filed in district court in the month of February 2023. So I haven't seen the numbers yet, or I haven't myself been able to go into the numbers for March, but that's what we're looking at. And then finally, a little bit more of the municipal voucher program. If any folks who are here present, whether attendees or part of the committee, want to know more, the RFP is available to the public. We are hoping to ramp this program up as quickly as possible. We are using part of the funding source to be ARPA funds, which have to be spent down by December of 2024. And so the incentive is already created in the program inception to have this program be ramped up off the ground as quickly as possible. So our target date for housing placements is September of this year. And so I just wanted to share that all with you. Next slide, please. And then finally, one very important piece, what rental assistance and or housing supports from the COVID area are expiring. As I mentioned before, ERAP, it was a program that was funded mostly through Recovery Act funds, and this ended April 15, 2022. And this, the closing of this program was basically an impact throughout the whole region. For some context, ERAP provided up to 18 months of rental assistance with no dollar limits. And essentially for some families, this funding ended from day to night, right? With no such recovery in sight, either through other programs such as rental assistance. There was no other program that was there to fill the gaps. And so families were really left scrambling and trying to figure out what to do, which we now see in our office as a lot of families looking for prospective rent and looking for arrears. This program was replaced by what we're now deeming as something called traditional RAF program. Traditional in the sense that a lot of the rules mirror what was in place pre-COVID. And so what that means is that there's a limit to how much rental assistance can be procured. So it's around $10,000, and you can only receive that amount of money once in a 12-month period. There's only embedded in the program guidelines is also a limit to how much prospective rent one can receive. So one can only receive 1 month of prospective rent, even if it's still under the $10,000. So it's very, very limiting when we're trying to work with families who need a little bit more than 4 weeks in order to try and stabilize themselves, whether that be looking for a new job, through trying to, get their case assessed by an immigration lawyer, or if they're currently in evictions proceedings and they're trying to piece together either some sort of affordable housing application or otherwise. A lot of times it takes way more than a month in order to figure in order to figure out a plan for moving forward. This new guideline also established a new centralized system, all online, where landlords also have to be able to access a portal online. So as you can imagine, this really affects a lot of the mom and pop landlords, a lot of whom are very much willing to try and work and collaborate with tenants. And now here's an extra bit of barrier, right, which is being able to log in, remember their passwords, and sort of be able to navigate an online portal, which they didn't have to before. They also require notices and summons and complaints in order for applications to even be considered. So we're talking about just base eligibility. The direct payment programs to tenants has stopped. That was something that was available to folks under ERAP, which ended last April. And another thing that's not on this this particular slide that is important to note is that not only do you need a notice to quit and or some sort of eviction proceedings in order to just apply, you also need to substantiate that with something that they're calling good faith cause for why you are behind on rent, right? And that's sometimes a lot of times very difficult, especially for low income or immigrants communities to prove when by virtue of their immigration status, right, through no fault of their own, either are in between jobs or not being able to work, right? It's hard to prove good faith in that matter. So it is a big barrier. And finally, our program that I mentioned previously, right, like the Flex ARPA, will be ending in December in 2024, but the mayor has committed an additional $3 million for rental assistance once those ARPA funds are spent down. With that, I think that's the whole presentation. I know I took you all through a lot. I think I was speaking rapid fire, but I want to make sure that we have time for questions and any clarifications on any of the pieces that I mentioned.
Thank you, Lydia. It certainly does highlight what a multi-pronged and complex problem it is to try and provide housing stability to all of these different kinds of communities and needs. And are there any questions? Either, I guess we could invite either the public or the panelists to ask a question.
I do have a hand raised in the public. It was raised actually before Lydia's presentation, so invite if you'd like, Tori.
Yeah, we have one more invited testimony, but since I already opened up that invitation, let's take that question, and then we'll take our last invited testimony.
Okay. Oh, actually, what Tori Antonino wanted to know is, has the public portion of this meeting passed? And so the intention is to return to the public portion of the meeting after the last presentation. So if you'd like, we can continue with that and then come back and invite members of the public to offer their comments again.
Okay, great. So this is our last invited testimony from Public Space and Urban Forestry. It's going to be John Bronikamp will give us a brief presentation, and then we will open it up to the public for input, questions, or any comments. Thank you, John.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. Roberta, I do apologize. There's one more PowerPoint.
That's quite all right. I'm queued up this time. Let me just get
Wonderful.
it showing.
All right, so just a little bit about myself and my department. So my name is John Bronikamp. I joined the Public Space and Urban Forestry Department, also known as PSUF, on last Monday. So I'm one of their newest employees. We also hired Allison Marr, who started about a month ago, who's the new ecological restoration planner. I work on public space planning and work on project management of different parks and open spaces within the city of Somerville. So next slide, please. So the PSUF mission is to plan, construct, and steward the public realm to promote environmental and public health vitality through the city's network of public spaces and urban forestry. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go over some of the roles and responsibilities that PSUF has for the city of Somerville. So we oversee working with landscape architects, designers, and contractors to design and construct parks, playgrounds, plazas, athletic fields, street and streetscapes, and street tree plantings, which we aim to plant about 350 trees a year. We also oversee policy revisions and adoptions like the climate change resiliency, zoning, privately owned public spaces, also known as POPs, planting, uses of parks, tree preservation ordinance, and acquisition of land. We also did a few projects related to the COVID pandemic, working on spacing for elections, outdoor seating permits, and farmers markets Next slide, please. So we also work with DPW on maintenance operations of different horticultural projects, our fields, our water features, irrigation, and stormwater infrastructure. We also attend committees like this one. The Urban Design Committee is one, Urban Forestry Committee, Conservation Commission, and Community Preservation Committee. Next slide, please. So the Public Space and Urban Forestry Department is actively working to reach Summer Vision's goal outlined in the 2040 goal of 105 new acres of open space within the city of Somerville. This goal of an additional 105 acres of public space is an aspirational number that was created by the community process and outlined in this 2040 Summer Vision plan. The city of Somerville is the most densely populated city within the Northeast, and although we have less space per person, everyone is extremely close to a park. Currently, we are at 97% of people are within a 5-minute walk of different open spaces. The city of Somerville has created roughly 21 new acres of open space since 2010, and we are actively working to achieve the goal of 105 new acres of open space through a multi-pronged approach. The first prong is these areas of transformation. So you may know about Assembly Square, and this is one of the major areas of transformation where we are working with developers to create new buildings along with some open space within these and civic spaces. And we are also working on those privately owned public spaces within these different commercial and industrial hubs. So PSOF oversees the uses of zoning code to ensure that these spaces are accessible to all residents and visitors of Somerville. And this goal is to have these spaces indistinguishable from other public spaces so that the community feels invited into these spaces. Currently, we are looking at about 60 acres of open space is going to be coming from these transformational areas. So that is a big chunk of that 105 goal that we're trying to reach. Next slide, please. Actually, sorry. One other topic about that previous slide, but you don't need to go back, is the right-of-ways within the city of Somerville. We have roughly 600 plus acres of space within these right-of-ways, and so we can work on road diets and realignments to try and work to achieve this 105 acres of open space goal. The other and final main prong of how we can achieve this goal is through land acquisition. But one of the largest challenges is that most land in Somerville is privately owned, and of that, roughly half is residential. Working to acquire land when possible and feasible is one of the ways that we can increase our acreage of open space. The problem with this is that currently to purchase land, we are appraised at $400 a square foot. So acquiring an acre of land would cost roughly $17.5 million. So looking at that, acquisition isn't going to be the sole source of how we're going to achieve that 105 acres of space. But with land acquisition being so expensive, we as the CPC should continue to increase funding for open space acquisitions and try to get more open space through that development. Here you can see two different properties that we have acquired through this acquisition, 217 Somerville Ave on the left-hand side and 5 Palmer on the right-hand side, where our community garden is currently. Next slide, please. So next I want to talk about the access to open space. Here is a watershed map, and you can see in green are our open spaces, and then in this orangey yellow color, you can see a bubble kind of consuming most of Somerville, showing those are the areas within a 5-minute walk to open space. And so you can see that nearly 95% of residents currently live within a 5-minute walk to public parks, and we're working to grow this percentage to 100%. PSUF is actively looking at purchasing different parcels of land in areas that are lacking this walkability to open space. You can see some of these open areas in our transformational areas and other little pockets. Parks like 217 Somerville Ave will have a key role in us reaching that 100% goal. And we have increased access to many parks and open spaces within the Somerville, like Healy Field and Haley Field and the community path. And with that, I would like to open it to any questions we have about PSUF.
I have a question. The POPs, are they sort of like restricted to be open space in perpetuity?
Yes, that is correct. So we work with the developer to create these open spaces. We work with them to create a contract that works on maintenance of these areas. So they'll work on the maintenance, and then we try and provide signage or other amenities that kind of invite the public into these spaces and make them feel welcome and that it's inviting within these spaces.
Any other questions from the community or the committee? All right, I think it was really interesting to hear from everyone tonight and to hear about how the funds are being used and any, an input on the work that you're doing. All very good work. And we're proud to support it in whatever way we can through the CPA funds. I guess I'll make another call out to the community if they want to ask a question or raise their hand or put something in the chat.
All right. Tori Antonino has raised her hand, so I am going to unmute. Let me try to unmute. Are you able to unmute yourself, Tori?
Yep, I think that's good.
Great.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for your work serving on the committee. Those are excellent presentations from our staff. My name is Tori Antonino. I live at 65 Boston Street. And I'm really pleased to hear from John. Hi, John. It's Tori.
Hey, Tori.
I met him at the Urban Forestry Committee meeting. Very exciting to expand our PSUF staff. Exciting to hear that there is a plan on how to achieve our 105 acre goal that was set in the Summer Vision 2040. I know that we'll be getting property through the transform areas, and as we produce master plan special permits, we'll be able to identify places to have civic space. And land is really expensive, and I think anytime there's an opportunity to purchase something that can be created into a park is going to be a rarity. So having enough funds in that is going to really be important. I think there are other ways in the zoning starting to require open space for MR properties in particular, and more in our, for commercial buildings. But that's not you guys' purview. But I just want to encourage funding for our open space. It's like we are becoming more densely populated, and just having a connection to be able to have green. I'm sort of a green space advocate, and the qualities of being in nature and just having more space, more wild spaces in particular. So I was wondering if it is possible to acquire CPA funds to allow citizens who do, you know, I don't want to say restoration habitat, but sort of like regenerating the landscapes with our native plants. Like if they do, like Somerville Garden Club has this lovely space on the bike path. Green and Open Somerville had CPA funds for our very successful, thank you for the funds, Morse Kelly Butterfly Garden. And we closed it out. And the past few years, we have just been spending money on planting materials. So I guess one of my questions is, could CPA funds be used to acquire planting material to enhance our public spaces that might lack in sort of in native plantings in particular, but that would be done by volunteers. Is that, someone answer that question?
I can answer that question. I think that a project like that is something that certainly could potentially be eligible, and I'd want to review a more detailed description of a specific project on a specific site. And the way that you could apply for that would be first, especially you'll learn more about this if you were to stay on the entire meeting tonight, because we're going to be talking about the application process later. But understandably, it may be a long meeting. So we'll provide this information to the public in other ways later. But you would first submit an intent form, which is a brief description of the project that you'd like to suggest. And if it's a project on city land, then I would, as the CPA manager, I would identify who is the city department that has responsibility for that land, or that has a responsibility for that type of improvement project, and ask if they'd be willing to partner with the organization on the project. This is similar to the way that the project was carried out at Morris Kelly Playground. So the way to initiate that would be for the organization to submit an intent form, which is the vehicle that I'll use to begin the matching process, so that we can determine if there's a possibility for us to be able to make that project happen.
Okay, that makes the most sense. There's a desperate need for a Miyawaki project, so maybe that's this year's Green and Open aspiration. So yeah, I guess I'm just here speaking in support of monies to get to this 105-acre goal. And of course, I support affordable housing. Of course, everyone supports affordable housing, but I just wanted to give a voice to open space and a shout out to historic preservation. And you know, it does make a difference at Somerville having this sense of place and honoring our history. And I don't know if the city hall is an historic building, but can we fix the cupola? Is there any small, like, I just kind of know you guys in terms of when the funding gets allocated, we're just don't want to forget about you. So, and just be having buildings that we can really be proud of and admire. Okay, I'm going to stay on because I'm going to double task, and I look forward to, you know, hearing more later about the process. And thank you all for doing what you do.
Thank you very much, Tori, for attending and speaking up. Yeah, I think that's sort of the three legs of Community Preservation Act is, you know, the affordable housing, the preservation, and the open space, and they all do come together, make community. I think the one thing to be aware of is that the funds can't be used for anything deemed as like maintenance. It's really about sort of creation and new space and preservation and stuff. So just that will be something that you will need to sort of navigate with Roberta's help in terms of putting together something that's about kind of taking an existing space and transforming it. Is there anyone else with their hand raised?
Actually,
Here we go, Laura, our very own Laura.
thank you. I have a very kind of granular question for Lydia. Based on the presentation, I heard her mention a housing court, and I was not aware that Somerville had one. I just wanted to confirm that. Is that where eviction cases wind up? Is there a Somerville housing court?
Well, you know, every question, Laura, and Dick probably knows this as best as everyone else. Every question is more than a simple yes or no. To answer the question, yes, there is a Somerville District Court. It's actually found in Assembly, across the street from the Staples, if you're coming in from the direction of Medford. And that court actually serves, Dick, you'll have to correct me if I'm right. I think it serves Medford as well as Somerville for civil matters pertaining to eviction. But one other court that I want to point you to that housing cases can also be filed is something called the Eastern District Housing Court, which is also known as the Brook Courthouse, which is between the Haymarket and North Station stop. So that's another place that eviction cases can be filed, not just in the Somerville District Court. But I don't know if that's answering your question correctly.
So Somerville cases, some of them wind up in Boston then, right? That second court you mentioned is Boston. Okay. Yeah, yes. I did. Thank you. Just clarifying.
Of course, absolutely.
And just to clarify, the Somerville District Court is not branch of Somerville government. That's the state government, right?
Yes, a trial court. Yep.
I think also just back to Tori's question about the cupola, the cupola was awarded funds some time ago, right, for the restoration of the City Hall cupola, and it's just been a question of not having the bandwidth to engage in that. Or there was issues that has held that project up.
So it took a while, but the funds have been spent at this point on design for historic preservation of City Hall. But the implementation of that design is waiting for the, if I understand correctly, and we don't have anyone from Capital Projects here to correct me, the implementation is waiting for the combined project of restoration of City Hall and the 1895 building next to City Hall to create one combined campus with all of the departments.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the public or the committee?
No other hands raised from the public.
Okay. So I think with that, everyone's invited to stay on, of course, but we're going to kind of officially close the public meeting part of it, and we're going to move on to unfinished business. And is there anything you want to say in that transition there, Roberta?
I don't think so. I'm not sure whether procedurally we're supposed to have a vote to close the public hearing. I don't have a lot of public hearings under my belt.
I think we probably do, and our invited panelists are free to log off, except for those who serve on the committee who need to stay. So can I have a motion to close the public meeting? I see Dick Bauer has made a motion. Do I have a second?
A second.
From Laura. Okay. You want to take a vote, Roberta?
Sure, I'll call the roll. Jahan?
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Laura,
I second. Yep.
and David.
Yes.
All right.
Just say as a point of information, I think an actual vote is not necessary. I think the chair can just declare the public hearing closed, but the vote is fine as well.
No, it's extra close.
Thank you.
Right.
I haven't done a lot of public hearings, so thank you for
All
that.
right.
All right.
Great. And thank you to our presenters.
Mhm.
So I think the first item on our agenda for sort of ongoing business is the approval of the February meeting, which was held in March 1st. So the March 1st meeting minutes. Does anyone have any comments or corrections, or would they like to move to approve? All right. I didn't see any corrections either. They were very helpful to me since I missed that meeting.
Mhm.
May I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Jahan,
I'll second.
Laura seconded. All right, John?
There.
Dick, David,
Yes.
Dick?
All right, I keep muting myself because otherwise you'll hear me coughing a lot. Yes.
Laura. Thanks.
Yep.
And I too approve. Okay. So with that, the March 1st meeting minutes are approved. Then we have two grant projects to finish up on. The first will be the Affordable Housing Trust, and the second will be the Adams Magoon House. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Roberta to run through the Affordable Housing Trust.
All right. So we are, I have on the agenda tonight to request the committee to recommend funding for the Affordable Housing Trust in the amount of $1,618,683. This was actually, this is the amount of funds that we promised them a year ago when we set the budget for this year. And it was just an oversight on my part that I'm only now asking for your recommendation for these funds to go to the Affordable Housing Trust. So I've drafted a draft recommendation letter. This is the customary recommendation letter template that we've always used for the Affordable Housing Trust. There aren't any conditions attached. So I would just ask if there's a motion to recommend the funds.
So moved.
I'll second.
Right, and I will call the roll. Jahan,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Heather, Dick,
Yes.
Laura,
Yep.
and David.
I didn't hear my name called, but I would say yes.
Thank you.
I would like to point out that it says the letterhead has Mayor Curtatone as the mayor.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this was a template, wasn't it? Thank you for making the correction. I'll just highlight it so that I'll remember to change it later.
And on the same vein, I didn't notice it on all the approvals we did last month.
No, they've all been correct. This is the only one that that I pulled up from last year. Okay. Thank you. So I will close this. And then the next on the agenda is the decision that we have been coming back to throughout this year, which is the whether to recommend funding for the Adams Magoon House. So just to refresh your memories again, since not everyone was here, at the previous meeting, I'm going to share my screen with the spreadsheet. Can you see this spreadsheet now? Do I need to
No.
increase the
We
size?
saw it before and now it's
Oh,
off.
okay, sorry. So at the previous meeting, committee members discussed recommending funding for $150,000 for the Adams Magoon House. You know, I'm going to bring up the draft application letter for, or recommendation letter for this as well. With conditions that were given to us by the planning staff and the law department that would enable the funds to be returned to the city if the property is sold upon transfer of the property. And it says in our draft within XX years. Our discussion last time did not arrive at an absolutely final decision on whether or how long the committee would want to ask for a limitation on the number of years before the project would convert to a grant rather than having to be repaid to the city. Other conditions include that the city would have the right of first refusal to acquire the property. The grantee agrees to a preservation restriction on the property that covers both the exterior and interior of the building. And signage, our usual conditions, signage and both signage commemorating the Community Preservation Act as well as interpretive signage so that we understand what is the significance of this building. But the committee at the last meeting wanted to have a very clear policy on under what circumstances does the committee consider providing a grant of this magnitude to a private residence. And the committee members agreed in principle that this was a uniquely historic, uniquely significant property. But they wanted to have that determination of its unique significance be given to the CPC by an appropriate entity, not the CPC making that distinction. So the Historic Preservation Commission met earlier this month and discussed the property and agreed that this is a uniquely significant property. And a letter describing the property's unique significance is included in your meeting packet also this month. This was just added today in case you were looking for this in the meeting packet earlier and did not see it. So going into detail about the architectural details of the building and the historic information about the building, noting that the interior is especially well preserved, as well as the exterior of the building. It states that at our regular meeting, the Historic Preservation Commission voted unanimously to provide the CPC with comments regarding the property known as the Adams Magoon House, as followed. And I'm sure that you could direct questions to Dick about the HPC's discussion.
No, I think, well, personally speaking, I feel like this really covers sort of what we were asking for, to have that sort of determination provided to us in writing by an authority other than ourselves. I think the big point of discussion that we need to settle is the length of the term before it kind of converts to a grant. So I know 40 years have been discussed. I personally feel like that's a long time for a private homeowner to commit towards repaying the monies to the city on transfer, because it will be sort of protected by the covenants. I'll throw out 20 years as a point of discussion, and let's just take it from there.
I would push for a higher number. In most circumstances, not only this is unique, not only in that the building is unique, and as the HPC stated in the letter, and that was we were completely unanimous on that point. But it's also, to put a substantial amount of money into a private building is also unique. And I mean, I think it's a good thing to make sure that this house gets preserved. But I think to allow a windfall even in 40 years is unreasonable. That the purpose of making the grant is so that the building can be preserved and enjoyed by the people of Somerville, but it's not so that the owners can get a windfall even at 40 years. So I would push for, I strongly support doing this, but I would support for an even longer period. I would propose 99 years. And let me actually make one other comment right now while I have the floor, which is the original request for money was substantially more than this. And I understand that the owners have pared down their request, and we obviously can't make them take more money than they want to take. But given that we are offering them essentially as much money as they need to do the job, with no obligation other than A, to preserve the house, and B, to pay it back if it gets transferred at some point in whatever the time period is, they should take all of the money and do it. There's no reason for them not to take this money just because they would need to repay it upon transfer of the property. They will get the benefit of it in the meantime. All of the work can be done. The entire house can be preserved. And the worst that happens to them is that they have to pay back additional money if they transfer it, but there will be additional value in the house from them doing that. So while, as I said, we can't insist that they do it, I would strongly encourage them to say, here's money that you can use for a really long period of time, and take it and do the work and enjoy the benefit for yourselves, and let us enjoy the benefit for the city.
Can you remind me what is the amount that they're currently asking for?
They're currently asking for $150,000. The homeowner, so the $463,000 was the original ask, and that was determined by the architect who prepared the condition assessment of the building. And the homeowner was most comfortable with requesting funding going forward with a grant for just the highest priority items that were identified by the architect, which was the replacement of failing windows and gutters and some of the essential trim. And the remainder of the funds, the balance of the original ask, would have been to replace most of the clapboard and to do some repair around the foundation of the building, and perhaps, I think, to fascia under the eaves of the roof. And the homeowner, in addition to the responsibility of paying back the entire amount, which she was concerned would reduce her equity by a significant amount, the owner was also, I think, uncomfortable with that volume of work being done on her house when it wasn't initiated by her.
Have we seen a draft of the covenant, or that not happen until after we recommend it back to the law department?
Right, that's exactly what will happen. So the order of events that we agreed on with the law department was that first the committee will recommend the grant with these conditions requiring a covenant, and then the law department will prepare a draft covenant, and the homeowner will be asked to sign a memorandum of agreement saying that if she's given the grant, she will execute the covenant and the preservation restriction before any funds will be received. And then if the city council approves the grant, then we would actually move forward with the homeowner executing the deed restriction and the covenant, and then undertake the project. So that's the order of operations.
Yeah. I think that I was convinced at the end of the last meeting that, like Dick is saying, that it should be 40 or more years. I think that, all we're saying is we want, is that we would get that money back, on a transfer of the property. And I think also the city was going to have first refusal to acquire the property or a first transfer. Although I do think there was some discussion last time about what was the definition of a transfer, which obviously will need to be worked out, I guess, as they negotiate the memorandum of understanding or agreement and the covenant. But I do like the letter that we got. I think that is a clear expression, of the uniqueness of the property that we were looking for, and which I think is also important, with regard to our ability to turn, to go to the next homeowner that says, I want, money to replace my windows too. And I think it's important for us to be able to limit, the extent to which this is a slippery slope. Another thing that we discussed is the potential that they'd come back to us in 2 years saying, now we want to do the clapboard, now we want to do some other part of it, and how that would, whether we would just then, without a lot of debate, use the same model, or whether that, kind of brings up and opens another can of worms.
One thing to note is that if she did come back in 2 or 3 years, most likely the first, you would apply the first condition again with the grant being repayable. The preservation restriction would already apply to the building, which would mean that the city would already own an interest in that building, so that the city would have an interest in its preservation in place, that would at that point justify a further investment in preserving the building.
I have a question for Dick, or anyone who wants to field this question, which would be, so it's a $463,000 project all in. The homeowner isn't comfortable going all in at this point. She wants to do more of a $150,000 project. Is that investment, well, it's the return on investment there when it's you know, sort of a third of the entirety of the work that needs to be done to preserve this house?
Excuse me, I don't think I had an opinion about that. I don't know whether Sarah White is still here or whether she left.
She's here.
Thank you for hanging on, Sarah.
Oh, absolutely, no problem. Sorry, put my hair up now. I guess I have to let it down again, but not in relief. So how can I, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? How could I be of help?
Oh, now you're muted, Heather.
The applicant has revised their request to be just sort of the top priorities that were identified in the application, which was windows and I think some of the cornices associated with them, but not the entire thing. So it's now for about a third of the work that was originally requested. So my question is, if they're only comfortable doing about a third of the work to preserve this building, is the return on investment still there? Is it still as an attractive well, I guess it's not. I mean, I would love it if she would just do the whole thing and that would be that, you know. But given where the applicant is at this time, what are your thoughts about, you know, investing in 150 for a 460 project?
Madam Chair, if I could through you, I would add the caveat that having not the person who actually inspected the condition of the building itself, I would rely on certainly the feedback provided by the experts who did do that. So I think that in particular, when there are problems with windows in old houses such as this, there's certainly the ability to have water damage caused in the area around each of those windows because of the infiltration of water over time. So I think that there is indeed benefit in ensuring that a proper type of window is installed to prevent further damage from happening to the house as a result of the windows, just in the window portion alone, but also by doing this project, it can help ensure that additional damage, which we currently can't see, but more than likely exists, at least around some of those windows, can be addressed and fixed. Sheathing on buildings of this period, unless it's been, you know, patched in over time, usually tends to be very wide boards, like, you know, a foot, 2 feet, 2.5 feet, things like that. But that can also rot over time. Right? So sometimes the sheathing on these buildings is there in spite of itself. And it's important that that can be addressed. You might find some issues with either a post or part of a beam as well. So, you know, this project could actually uncover additional issues that do need to be addressed. And, you know, those are issues that should be, you know, addressed if at all possible. So I certainly think that there are merits in expending money to address some of these really key issues. If you look at, it looks like the right side of the building when you stand at the building on Broadway, but it's the original facade, front facade of the house. And if you look in that upper right-hand corner, there is a portion of the eave that is just open. And, you know, it would be my understanding, and Roberta, correct me if I'm wrong, that that would also be corrected as part of this project. That's really key for a lot of the same reasons, elements, animals, and things of that nature. So I don't think that we will have no benefit we will still get benefit by seeing a project of this lesser degree go forward. The ideal would be to undertake the whole project, but I would not be, you're in a different position because you have to decide on the allocation. And I can speak at it without that responsibility. So I understand the position that you're in, but I think that there is indeed, can be indeed a significant amount of benefit to undertaking this project and fixing some really key core issues that will only become much worse over time and have probably already done some degree of damage to the house as it is. Does that address your question, or would you like me to be more specific or address anything else?
Yes, it does. Is the eave still in the 150, Roberta? I thought the eaves was a second phase.
No, I think that the 150, and I can bring this up, I may have to fish around a little bit. I'm gonna unshare my screen while I fish.
Okay.
I can bring up, I think in last month's meeting packet, I had included the full application.
While you look for that, I thought of another question, which was, because of the legal nature of the memorandum of agreement and everything, how do we handle, or do we need to handle, the idea of emergency funds or a contingency should they open up the building and find that they need to do some important structural work and come with an off-cycle application? I just wonder how that plays into this whole thing.
I think that it could continue to be handled the same way that we've done this application. In fact, if they open up the building, we'll have, and discover that more work is needed, we'll have the benefit of already having gone through this once and established what the policy is. And we don't have to go through all of this, work that we've been doing the last few months to find our way through it. We'd have that answered. So I have the file in front of me now. So the phase 1 is in a column. I can't really highlight it. So phase 1 is in this column that has a blue header. And it includes replacement of windows, replacement of existing window sash, deteriorated window sills and heads, deteriorated cornices, restoration of architraves, installation of new sheet metal assemblies, copper gutter liners, copper downspouts, sheet pan flashings under window sills, and cornice and trim. So I can provide, I can also dig up photos, not photos, but the drawings that illustrate where these would take place, if that would be helpful for you.
Roberta,
Yes.
do you know the date of this cost estimate?
This cost estimate was prepared last October.
October
This was-
2022?
Yes, it was submitted with the application. So it may be in the months before October, but it's somewhere
Yeah.
between.
Yeah, because as we've talked about before, I mean, costs have been going up dramatically over the last year or year and a half, of projects, any construction, equipment related work.
This does include a construction contingency of $12,000.
Well, a few different contingencies, it looks like.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's almost, I can't read the very bottom line. What is that, 148?
Yeah, 148,575. So I rounded up to 150.
Yeah, so there's almost $40,000 in contingencies, it looks like, right?
There are some design fees I see at the bottom for 12,000.
Okay. Yeah, yes, you have to subtract. Is that a design fee or is that a contingency design fee?
It just says design fee 10%.
Yeah, so there's a design contingency 10% and then a design fee 10%.
So there's a little bit of, hopefully a little bit of extra money in there.
You're muted, Dick.
It does seem like phase one includes the cornice work that Sarah has flagged as being high priority. As I've said before, I would rather have them take more money and do more, but that they have to be the ones who make the decision on that. It certainly seems, based on looking at the estimates and on what Sarah has said, that this is worth doing, even if they're not going to do the whole thing now. It does seem likely that they're going to come back either in a year or two, or possibly off cycle if they get started and realize what they're getting themselves into. I have one other comment, which is that this phase one work includes copper gutters and downspouts. And I actually think that that is not appropriate for this house. So we ought to condition it on not using those, but using, what would you think, Sarah? Should we just do standard aluminum? Should we ask them to do wooden downspouts?
Madam Chair, through you, Mr. Bauer, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, copper downspouts. So downspouts in general started to come into being in use in residential structures in this area about like 1750 or after. So that's in the period where they potentially would be used. I think that there's always a supposition that copper gutters and copper downspouts were what existed. Not necessarily the case. They could be zinc, they could be lead, they could be other things like that. Wood was also very common. I would not recommend wood in this. I know this is about following Secretary of the Interior standards, etc. But in this case, given I think the ability to perform the required maintenance and upkeep on a wood gutter, they are certainly more expensive to execute and more expensive to maintain. And if you're going to linseed oil them every year, a couple times a year, that's one thing. If you're going to line them with lead or zinc, that's another. But those are choices that really need to be made. And I think when you move to the point of doing a wood gutter, I think it just becomes that much more expensive and potentially that much more problematic. The wood that we have today available to do this is not old growth wood. Right? Old growth wood has rings that are very, very close together, right? Which makes it very solid, very hard, very durable. And as much as we try, we can't replicate that today. Honestly, I think that just a regular aluminum gutter that blends in with the house and is painted either the color of the trim or the color of the clapboards, whatever portion of the house it rests against, that would be sufficient. Still have to make sure that they get cleaned every year so that they don't overflow and back up behind the gutter itself. So there is maintenance to it, but I think there's far less maintenance to that than something that's that's a much more expensive to execute and maintain.
Well, good. I thank you, Dick. I appreciate you bringing that up again, because I know I had asked about that when we were first discussing it a couple of months ago. Just for environmentally, I would prefer that would, not be copper or lead. We don't need to contribute any more of those metals to our stormwater.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So within the approval letter, they have to finish up their final design, and then that would, I assume, go to Historic Commission prior to it, going into construction. So do we need to make comments about anything like that, or do we just comment on a kind of order of procedures, or how do we want to sort of flag that as something that is yet to be resolved through design and construction?
Well, if I may, I think it's in the application that they use copper. So I think we can ask for, at a minimum, that they amend the application so it doesn't reflect that they're planning to use copper. But then
Okay.
goes farther along the, the planning cycle, the city and historic preservation will then have to weigh in on, I think, final design. But at least it would be good for them to clarify in this initial funding request that it's not that's no longer their plan.
Yeah. We could clarify that or say, or as approved by the Historic Commission, blah, 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 get,
Word has just added language saying design will be approved by the Historic Preservation Commission. I would only suggest that we add some language making it clear that the HPC can make design changes from what is in their proposal so that they don't feel like, sorry, we have to do it the way, even if we can't do it that way because HPC won't approve it.
okay.
Yeah, well, certainly having HPC saying they wouldn't approve it as a backstop is great, but I'd still like to either have our funding, I don't know, Roberta, can we condition the funding, like saying this component of the plan, needs to be changed or some other language, or do we need them to change, or do we need them to change it?
I think that we can draft a recommendation that states that the actual scope of work will be as approved by. That's what I'm trying to find that language right now, but I can wordsmith it later before I send it to City Council. I'm going to highlight this so that I remember to come back to it and I don't save it. I don't send it with an incomplete sentence. So what I understand you're trying to say is that you would like to recommend the funding based on the scope that's provided by the architect, but that HPC will have final approval over the scope of work that is going to be completed with the grant funds.
Well, if that's as far as we can go, I'll be okay with that. If we can actually say we understand that, copper gutters are not necessary to maintain historic, elements of the property, and have it be, more explicit that that's what we're talking about.
Or that the committee recommends high quality aluminum downspout with pending Historic Preservation Committee approval or something like that.
Okay.
Because again, I think that the proposal to use copper gutters is right in their application. It's in the proposal. It's in the application.
Okay, I will. I don't know if you want me to perfect that language now.
No, I don't think that's necessary. I think
Okay.
as long as you kind of capture that flavor.
So Roberta, I have a quick question for you. It's regarding item number 2 with respect to the right of first refusal. I just want to better understand what is the notification mechanism and also the enforcement mechanism. Basically, how will the city of Somerville be notified the intent to transfer?
That's a good question. I'm assuming that we have a way to be notified of the intent to transfer. I don't. I have not had it, dealt with this situation before, so I don't know what that mechanism is.
I think that will get spelled out in the memorandum of agreement when the lawyers meet to hash out the memorandum of agreement.
And
But it is a good question. Yeah.
One of the important things that the committee asked for at the very outset was that number 1 be an actual covenant and not just in the grant agreement. So a lot of communities that have clawback agreements, it's only stated in the grant agreement. But this committee wanted to see for this project that be recorded on as a covenant.
That was us or the city attorneys?
That was you.
Good for us.
So I assume that that and the right of first refusal will be filed with the registry of deeds, which means essentially anybody who takes it subject to knowing that the city can just grab it because the city had the right to get it first.
That's very helpful to
So
know.
that's the mechanism.
That helps.
So I do have one comment and one question. So my comment is I do echo the comments by Dick and David about extending that length of time. I am concerned about a precedent being set about loaning funds from the CPC to private residences. So I think pushing that limit as far as we can will be a great mechanism to kind of contain that precedent, I guess, for lack of a better word. And then my question I do have is, so if the city proceeds to purchase this property, do the loans still have to be paid by the owner, or is that a different case because it's moving to city property?
I think that in such, like, if the city is to exercise its right of first refusal, the city would match the offer. Sarah, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The city would match the offer of a arm's length buyer, and that would and so the amount that has to be paid back to the city would be subtracted from that purchase price.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm weighing in not because I know, but I don't want you to think that my lack of weighing in is indicating that yes, that's 100% correct. Roberta, no question about your you having your thumb on the pulse of this, but I don't actually know the answer to that. But so I don't want anybody to think that my silence means that I do, because I don't.
That may also be something that gets worked out in the details with the legal department.
Okay.
I think there's going to be a lot of details that have to be worked out in that.
Yeah,
I mean, we talked about it last month. I think that's just a whole of what is a transfer. You know, if the woman leaves it to a grandchild, is that a transfer?
If she puts it into a trust.
Or if she puts it into a trust. But I think, yes, I mean, so I think there's a lot of questions, and I don't necessarily want her to have to pay it back if her intent is to leave it to a child. I mean, although the covenant would remain in effect, until it is transferred to a non-family, member is what I would hope would be the threshold, not, keeping it in the family. But that'll be for the attorneys to figure out, I think.
Yeah, and so what may end up happening is that after we develop the legal papers, we might need to come back to the committee to adjust these conditions anyway before we send it to city council. So unless the law department is able to write conditions that exactly resemble what you've stated, then we might have to come back and you'll have a chance to see the actual documents before the recommendation is final.
So Roberta, I would actually encourage that, just because even though we have a set of recommendations here, or the conditions rather here, it's really important for us to better understand what the legal details might be once we have them available, because my intent is to preserve the structure. If the current homeowner is agreeing to the covenants and the restrictions therein, I want to make sure that to the earlier conversation, we're able to truly preserve the structure. If there's a need for phase 2 application, she should certainly feel comfortable in a subsequent funding year to come out or emergency basis as needed and as appropriate. So I think that's really important as well, because we don't want to place all these covenants, and the covenants I agree with. I mean, it's just a concern that I have about the structure itself. I mean, if we don't achieve that end goal, which is to preserve it, I think that's going to leave a gap. So thank you. I think that'd be helpful.
So going back to the term, the length of time, I guess I'll just put one more pitch in for a shorter length of time in that I don't think we want to discourage people from, I mean, I think we want people to preserve these old historic houses. This one is uniquely significant. Would she be willing to do more of the scope? You know, like how is 99 years going to hit her? Versus, I think she's heard 40. If it were to be, you know, 30 years, would she feel better about doing a larger project? You know, it's a lot to ask a homeowner to commit to a 99-year repayment plan.
And just to point out, Heather, she is in effect getting, you know, an interest-free 40-year loan or 90-year loan. I mean, it's not a terrible deal.
No, it's not, and I'm willing to support the committee's decision, however the committee decides. But I just wanted to put a little pitch in there, just to consider that, you know, part of what we're trying to do is to preserve historic Somerville, and with this, are we, you know, there's a slippery slope of not wanting everyone to feel like they can come get interest-free loans, but on the other hand, you know, just trying to encourage people to put their houses into historic covenants and restrictions and to preserve them. So, I mean, that affects her property value right there, putting on the restriction.
My understanding was that the house is already protected. I mean, they already can't alter it. You know, the problem that she has, that this current owner has, is that the house needs maintenance that they can't afford. You know, I mean, so I mean, I'm just please someone correct me if I have that wrong. You know, but she couldn't put in aluminum, you know, windows as it is, you know, and get it approved.
And so Heather, your concern about making that number high is that the owner will see that and just get overwhelmed. That it's too long of a commitment, right?
I think she already has had that response.
Uh-huh.
Although it also sounds like it's from the sort of project management and living in a house under renovation for an extended period of time. That's her other concern, but that's what, yeah, that's my concern.
And Dick, maybe if you could, just to help me out here, explain again what's the pro, what's the advantage again, like?
So it's, as David said, you know, this is in effect an interest-free loan and a pretty long-term one. As long as she continues to own the house, she gets the benefit of all of the work and she doesn't have to pay anything back. It's simply that at the end, when she transfers the house, she makes a big profit on it because it is appreciated a lot, and makes an extra big profit because we have paid to have money for the work done, that it's not unreasonable for us to say, you should pay it back to us. And that's true at 20 years or 30, or for me, it's still true at 50 and 60 years.
Okay. Okay, so it's the argument in favor of that is just it's a protection for the city, basically, right?
That's right. And
yeah,
so that the money is being used here for its purpose, which is preserving the house while minimizing the amount of private benefit that derives from it. And as long as it's not like she's sitting there hanging over her head thinking, oh no, even after 30 years, I still owe this money. She should be thinking, after 30 years, I still get to live in this house and all of the work has been done and I haven't had to pay a dime for it. I only have to pay a dime at the point that I sell the house and cash out.
Right, and it's increased in value because of the loan, of course. And so the cash out is bigger.
That's right.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You know, if some of her concerns are what does transfer mean, and And if she does things to preserve it while keeping it in the family and nobody is actually cashing out, is she going to have to pay? That seems to me to be a fair consideration. And hopefully the law department will be able to craft something that strikes an appropriate balance, because it's, but the idea is that at some point, the property will get sold, a lot of money will get made, and there's no, to my mind, no good reason why the family ought to get all the profit on the work that the city has paid for.
Right, right.
In circumstances. You know, and she will still have had an interest-free loan, so, which is to say, in effect, you know, because whatever we put in effect gets amortized. If she sells the property in 30 years, you know, once you discount for the fact that she's had it interest-free, she'll be paying back a lot less than the 150 or the 450, whatever number we put into it.
Okay, thank you. And I couldn't attend the last meeting, but I did read the notes. Did I see that we're also trying to like put add clarity to the, what is a transfer, like is a transfer of property within a family member to one family member to the next versus putting it on the market?
We discussed that at the last meeting, to the same level of detail that we have this evening. And I think
Okay.
it's ultimately going to be something that we work out with the legal department.
Okay, thank you. Fair enough.
The other thing that we discussed at the last meeting, and it seemed like there was a reason we couldn't do that, but I don't remember what it was the notion of the grant having a depreciating value over time. That although she's, at this point the owner is getting $150,000 worth of new windows, while the property itself may appreciate in value, the windows are not appreciating in value. The windows, when they sell it in 30 or 40 years, are 40-year-old windows. And I think that there was some legal reason that wasn't that we couldn't have it be a depreciating grant. I guess because it's a grant and not a loan or something like that.
Well, I'm not sure that that's true, that we identified a legal reason why we couldn't. In communities that have what I called a clawback provision, where the funds are going to be recuperated if the property is sold within a certain period of time, typically when that's used, it's a shorter period of time, say 10 or 15 years, and it steps down over time, so that it's not 100% in year 9 and then 0 in year 10, but they have to pay back a diminishing amount over time.
Yeah, and someone, I don't remember now. I don't remember the details of the discussion, but I know we talked about it, and then at the end of the conversation, we didn't really. It didn't seem to me we were going to pursue that, but I don't remember why. But
I would be more comfortable with the longer terms if there was a mechanism like that in place.
I would as well.
Agreed. I agree. So
just for the record, I would love to see a mechanism where they could keep it in the family without that being a transfer of ownership, even putting it into a trust or something like that. I think encouraging that.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that as well. I don't want to.
Right. I just have a quick question, and actually David's comments prompted this. Since we're looking at getting funding for all this improvement work, not just a $150,000 increment, but potentially future increments as well as needed, is there any consideration for the homeowner to increase their insurance policy to reflect the work that's been done? And if we're talking about the value of the property being increased, is that within our purview jurisdiction to ask for that or have that considered as part of this condition?
not sure that I understood the question.
Sure. So if we're talking about providing funding for this homeowner, which is essentially a private property, the value of the property increases, and with the value increasing due to the additional renovations and so forth, can we ask for the homeowner's insurance policy to be increased? So let's just say a year from now, hopefully not, but if there's an accident or an issue that occurs, a disaster that occurs, the homeowner's policy will cover the increased value of the property.
I imagine that the insurance company most likely adjusts the homeowner's insurance based on improvements that they've made to the building as part of their policy. But that also brings up a point that as the value of the property increases, so does their tax bill.
That's true.
So that's also a way that this is impacted.
Well, are there any other points that people want to make, or does someone want to try to craft a proposal for the committee to consider?
And by craft a proposal, you're meaning specifically for the length of time and if there's to be a step down.
Yeah.
Would it, I'm not versed in law, but would it be correct to say that we're talking about upon arm's length transfer of the property?
I don't know the term.
We're really talking about a sale for money as opposed to a transfer within the family in which the family would get the property and it would continue to be subject to this restriction. But I think we should let the law department figure out how to actually draft that and try and do that ourselves.
Yeah.
So in
I just
response,
wanted to be as accurate as I could in my.
Yeah.
In response to Heather's solicitation, I'm going to stake out a position which I think is probably not going to get a majority support, but let me start by staking it out, which would be 99 years and not stepping down.
And Dick, can you explain what you have against stepping down? Because I think that it might have been your response to it last month that was persuasive even to me, but I don't remember. I just don't remember how I was persuaded.
And this may not be persuasive to others. It's really that the purpose of this funding is not to provide a private benefit to the family. It's to preserve the historic fabric of the house, and that at whatever point they transfer it, that we simply get back the money, they will have had the use of the house and the use of all of that fabric all that time, and they will have had an interest-free loan, which, you know, if we sit down and calculate the numbers, you know, if they have to pay it back at 50 years at current interest rates, they're paying back a lot less than the money that we paid in. We have to do the numbers to figure out what it was, but it's probably only having to pay back a quarter, because the rest of it, well, they will have gotten the benefit of in the form of.
And I think that was your position before, which made sense to me, which was that they still had the benefit of the windows for all those years. And if we have the step down, then essentially we're forgiving, they're getting that benefit ultimately for free.
That's right.
Mhm.
We're saying each year, a portion of this grant you get to keep. And then the next year you get to keep another, and the next year you get to keep another. And it seems to me, given that this is a private house, that that's not benefit that I think that they're getting. I want them to get the benefit of having the money available so that they can do the work. And I'm willing to have that be, in effect, an interest-free loan for a long period of time, but I would not want them to get the benefit beyond that of just saying each year we're going to basically give you some cash because you're in a historic house.
Mhm.
So that's my position. I from the conversation, I think it will not carry a majority, but I wanted to start by staking out that position.
So I'll throw out another position just to keep just as an example where let's go with the 99 years or the 100 years. But every 20 years it goes down 20%. So by the end of 100 years it's zero.
Did have another idea that kind of goes along those lines of determining the long lifespan of these windows or different fixtures, and at that point of its lifespan, then it can start stepping down because the repairs will be needed yet again, and kind of leave it at the $150 loan until the warranty or the lifespan of these windows is reached, and then it can step down at that point.
But step down over another series of years.
Correct, yes. The timer would start at that point.
Mhm. I like that idea.
We won't know until the Historic Preservation Commission approves the product, what the actual lifespan of the product is.
Right, okay.
I think we would probably just have to be arbitrary and pick some times, right? There are a lot of buildings in this city that are over 100 years old that still have their original windows in them.
Are these are the original windows on this 300-year-old house?
None of these are the original windows.
It's the problem.
And newer windows, unfortunately, don't tend to last as long as older windows.
And I think, right, I think if you rely on the window company's warranty, it's probably 25 years.
Mhm. I think that's probably about right.
Madam Chair, may I make a quick comment?
Please.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So there are a couple of windows on this on the Adams Magoon house that, if they are not original, they're of the period. But obviously we have problems with those that are not. When it comes to replacement windows, like Mr. Bauer said, depending on what they choose, the lifetime might be different. If it's a replacement window from a modern manufacturer, that's one thing. If it's an all wood window that is made for the building, then its lifespan will be much longer. And especially replacement windows today, if you're looking at something with obviously the double paned and the argon gas between it, one of the first things to go is that gas itself, right? When it starts to cloud. So from the moment you put it in, it starts to degrade in its efficiency. However, if you put in, for example, an all wood window, and you can still double paint it, or you can put energy efficient storms outside of it, if that window is maintained, or if that window is then restored, say 15, 25, 30 years down the road, then you're going to get another 15 to 30 years out of that very same window. So I don't know how much that impacts how you would want to, I guess, reduce the payback based on age of the window, but depending on what is done, there might not be that much reduction in value that the window is giving to the house because it's being maintained and restored, and that process is going on and on. I happen to have a house from 1735 to 1742. We've never really pinned down exactly when it is. And I do have windows from the Georgian period still in the house that have been restored and maintained and restored and maintained in storms and things like that. So I've gotten a lot of bang for my buck out of those windows. So it's something to think about depending on what the choice is that's made by the homeowner and then decided on by the HPC as to how you might think about that decrease in value.
Does anyone want to try and take a stab at another proposal for the committee to consider?
Or to put specific numbers to what we've just discussed.
Yeah. How about this? Do we want to have a motion on whether or not to have a step down process or not? Just vote on that, yes or no, and then try to come up with a proposal?
I'm not sure I'm ready for that, because I'm also was kind of mulling whether something in between is, you know, a 50-year with no step down, you know, like kind of split the baby.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
You know, so it's not, I mean, I feel like it's, you know, I mean, I think we have these two different, you know, these two different ways we can do it. I mean, obviously there's the Dick approach, which is, yeah, no step down and really long, or, you know, or kind of trying to find something in the middle, you know, either longer period and no step down, or I mean, longer period and step down, or not as long, but still, I would still go with 40+ years, you know, and no step down. And I definitely, as I sit here now, I'm not sure which I prefer.
Mm-hmm.
I may be leaning toward the more medium period and no step down, just because it seems more straightforward, you know, rather than having to figure out the step down.
Yeah. So let's say that David has just put a proposal on the table of 50 years, no step down.
I'll stand by that at least for a little while. Do we feel like we're ready to try and come up with something that we can vote around, or do we need more information or discussion? Where are we at as a committee? I'm mostly comfortable concluding, though, I don't want to go through this on a lot of properties.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like the 50-year no step down, partly because while we don't want to have a flood of private homeowners doing this, we do want these beautiful, big old special houses in Somerville to be preserved, especially ones that have multiple points of significance, like this house does. Not all of them do.
But to that point, I think one of the things that you know, and one of the reasons we wanted the, you know, the specific statement from, you know, Historic Preservation Commission was to make this house seem really truly exceptional. Like there's not, you know, that there's not a lot of these houses in Somerville that we would entertain this sort of a plan for. You know, so I really am trying to think of this as a one-off, not a template, you know, for how I would like to see a lot of these projects come before us. You know, maybe others disagree, and maybe you're right, Heather, that there are a lot, you know, some number of other ones that we would want to do exactly this for. But I think just the fact that of how hard it is for us to navigate this is as good a reason for me as any for us not to want to get into it.
Hopefully part of the idea of the effort that you've all been putting into this discussion is that it could be replicable if need be.
Yes, Could be replicable if need be. Exactly. And that's also why I think it's so important that we get it, you know, that we're as comfortable as we can be, so that when it need be, we're okay kind of doing something very much that looks like this again.
Mhm. Well, and the grant application now is for considerably less money. You know, I think when it's like 450,000, the longer term makes more sense, but when it's 150,000, I personally feel like we could do the 50-year.
But I'll be very surprised if the homeowner doesn't come back with subsequent proposals to do more, because I assume that this work is going to need to be done,
Yeah.
and the homeowner is still not going to have the resources to do it. You know, so I think we have to anticipate. I mean, maybe I'll be wrong, but I think I'll be surprised though if in 2 or 3 years we don't have another proposal like this from, you know, the
Yeah.
same homeowner.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I mean, and again, I'm okay with that, but that's
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
we're trying, you know, that I think it's so important to try and get it as close to right as we can. So we have three proposals on the table.
All right, well, let's start with Dick's proposal for 99 years, no step down. And let's just take a vote on, is this all right, folks, if we just vote on these 3 proposals and see whether or not we can even get a
Multi-vote?
Maybe I have a suggestion for expedience. So this isn't an official vote. The official vote requires a roll call, but maybe you could use a show of hands
Straw
to
vote.
sort out where you're going to land on this condition, and then we'll take an official vote after.
Okay.
And so the 3 options are the 99 years, no step down, the 50-year, no step down, and then the step
99
down
years with step down.
at 20% every 20 years. Okay.
Roughly.
Thank you.
Some,
Okay.
yeah.
Was after the life of the windows or something though, right? Or was it just 20% every?
Well, I think we can hone that proposal. I think that proposal could be the 99 years with a step down after the warranty of the manufacturer's warranty. And then figure out what that step down is.
It's going to be recorded in the covenant. But I'm not sure whether we can include the manufacturer.
Let's actually not get into that level of detail until we see where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So straw vote, 99 years, no step down.
No steps down, you said?
Can we vote?
No
more
step
than
down.
once?
Can we vote more than once? Yeah, that's a good question.
You can vote more than once.
So
Okay.
I would vote for that as well.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that might.
So that we've got 3 for 99 years, no step down. Then the second one was like 99 years with step down.
And I got confused. And a step down starting when?
That we'll
After
get to that
20
next.
years,
We don't-
20%.
Okay, so I don't get to. Okay, so I don't get to know that yet. Okay.
Yeah.
So a hypothetical step down somehow.
Yeah, I think I
99
vote
years
for
with
that
some
too.
kind of step down. Okay. All right.
Or
Uh,
review.
50 years, no step down. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that informally seems to have the most support. I'm I guess I'm trying to find a way to move us forward because we actually still have more items on our agenda this evening that are important to get to. So we either need to feel like we're ready to kind of wrap up this discussion within some reasonable amount of time and move on to other business, or we need to table it yet again. I feel like we're very close to being able to wrap it up to something where we can kind of at least move it on to the next phase with the lawyers and the MOU.
I would agree with that. I think that there's so many other details that have to be worked out. It still may, land on the rocks, but I think that I'm okay with us saying, here's what we think we're comfortable with,
Okay.
Were there other
shall we-
conditions that we actually need to discuss?
I think
Are
the
there-
other
are there-
conditions are set, with the exception, so what I didn't add in here is from the previous, I'm gonna make you guys seasick for a moment while I fish around.
I'm sorry,
Roberta, whenever you don't face the camera, your voice trails away.
Oh, I'm sorry, I said I'm gonna make you seasick for a moment while I fish around for the last one. Recommendations. So I can copy the conditions that we added, the standard conditions that we added last month.
Yeah.
There. So this would be all of the conditions I added. So the first 5, actually the first first 4 are unique to this property, and the last 3 are standard conditions.
It's gonna be hard to see.
Okay. So the number 1 is sort of what we were just talking about.
Yes.
The 50-year.
And we did the change from transfer of property to sale of property. I think to at least try and clarify that we're not talking about an intra household, transfer, or a, but again, I don't know whether we'll have the final say on that. I think I think the lawyers are going to decide
Yeah.
that.
This reflects your preference.
Yeah. I mean, as long as they understand that that's the distinction we're trying to make.
Okay.
Does the second one need to clarify? Does it go without saying that the second one is at the time of sale of the property that city has first right of refusal? I mean, maybe that's obvious. I don't know.
It does get tricky to try and consider every angle because it could be a sale to a sibling where one child buys out the other children, but and it's still staying within the family. But I think we have to kind of.
It could also be that sometime in the future, her children might have to take out a mortgage in order to pay the city. If the property goes to them. So there is a remedy for that situation that doesn't.
But I'm trying to parse that. So if the city goes to if it's the city goes to the children, I don't even know if there are children, but if the property goes to the children and it's not a sale, it's just they inherit it, or it goes into a trust in their name or in someone else's, you know, for them,
Yeah.
then if our definition of sale is kind of successful, that wouldn't trigger them having to pay the money back. It would only be a subsequent sale for, you know, cash. And even if they decide to sell it to some, you know, second cousin for cash, then I think we would want our money back. You know, that would, you know, that I think, you know, if there's significant cash involved, you know, then I think then it's a sale.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the distinction, you know, but where before we just said transfer property, well, you know, yes, the property is transferring even if there's no cash exchange, you know, in the extent, in inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's my non-legal real estate, you know, grasp of it.
And thank you for that.
I'll send my regular commission charge.
All right, well, how about looking at this, what do we call these, letters of approval?
So first, I think what we want is for you to have a vote to recommend $150,000 for the high priority renovations recommended for the Adams Green. And then a second vote to approve the conditions stated in the letter of recommendation.
Okay. So can I have a motion to approve $150,000 for the Adam McGoon's house?
I'll make such a motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Great.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Jahan,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Yes,
David,
Yes.
Laura.
Yes.
Great, motion is approved. Then the next we'd be looking for a motion to accept the conditions stated in the draft letter of recommendations.
I'll make that motion as well.
I can second.
And I will call the roll. Jahan,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
yes,
David,
Yes.
and Laura.
Yep.
Well, congratulations, you all. You've just made the hardest decision. You just completed the hardest funding round ever. Well, I can't speak for that. Dick has seen many more funding rounds, so I don't know how this compares to the earlier ones.
I would say that this was in a lot of ways the hardest one.
Well, and I want to say I appreciate the really good discussion about it. I thought that was really helpful.
I do too. Next, and any other, ready for the next order of business? Next order of business is review the application process. Huh?
Don't get a little breather.
A little
Do you want to
breather.
take a 5-minute?
No, I was joking. I was joking.
Okay.
So after that, you know.
All right, so the next order of business is and I'm sorry, I closed my my agenda, so I'm going from memory. Correct me if I'm wrong. It is to review the draft application materials. So I will go over this very quickly. I'm sharing my screen again. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. I see.
I'll mostly look at this first page, and I might have sent you a not quite perfect version earlier because Heather noted only 3 items in the little table of contents here on the first page, and I had 4. The other edits that you suggested, that you pointed out, Heather, I just made those corrections now.
Okay.
So the application.
And just for the
packet-
committee's sake, that was all just like formatting and numbering and like little niggly stuff, and I saved anything about content for tonight's meeting.
So I made some substantial changes to the application packet from previous years until now. My goal is to make it look easier to applicants, to make it clearer, more transparent, and easier to navigate without having made any real substantial changes to the actual process. Last year, we made a change to the application process in adding this intent forms stage. The intent form is for non-city applicants to just give me a heads up early on that they're intending to apply for CPA funds, so I can begin to discern what coordination they need with other city staff to complete their application process. Do they need to partner with another city department on a project? Do they need to get on a Historic Preservation Commission agenda? Do they need to coordinate with any other department? So I want to make sure that they have all that information as early as possible so that we can get that in motion. So that was a substantive change made last year. This year, all of the changes that you've seen have been just in the way that the instructions are laid out. So the first item that I cover is minimum eligibility criteria. So I'm thinking that a person who opens up the application packet, the first thing that they want to know is, does this apply to me? Can I apply for CPA funds? So the first section answers that question. Then the second section, in each of these sections, it's just 2 pages long. So the second section is, how do I apply for CPA funds? So that's a 2-page description of the application period. And then there's a long section, 10 pages of CPA program information. So this is the details that you need to know to help you design your application. So I will, having given you that overview, I'll just sum through this quickly in case you haven't had a chance to look at it so that you can see what it looks like. This is the minimum eligibility criteria. How do I apply? So then we have the eligibility chart. And then section 2, applying for CPA funds. The first page just lists what all the forms are with links to those forms. I have them in paper in the back just because we may still have some applicants out there who prefer to see things on paper. That's an option, but electronic is preferred. And so then I describe each of the steps with a little bit, just a couple paragraphs of instruction for each of the steps. Going through the applicant presentation at CPC meeting. In the previous version of the application packet, it went all the way through signing grant agreements. So it talked about each of the steps that happened up through then. And I felt that that was more information than applicants would need at this point in time. And then the program information is all compiled from the old application packet I put into one section here. It was maybe somewhat ordered differently in the previous packet. So comparative of, so just general program guidelines, comparative evaluation criteria, and then projects proposed on public property, accessibility requirements for projects intended for public use. And then this is new. I asked for the Office of Sustainability to give us a one-pager that describes what the sustainability requirements are for building projects and how the specialized stretch energy code and the stretch energy code relate to historic preservation projects in particular. And then historic preservation eligibility requirements is carried over. And then the rest is the application forms and prompts for people who prefer to see all of this on paper before going into the electronic version. So I would, before I move on, maybe if you have any comments or suggestions about that overall layout or what information might need to be added or subtracted.
So I have I like the overall layout. I think it is user friendly. My concern is people looking at this first page here and they see the May 19th date and they think, oh, well, I didn't get in an intent form, I can't apply this year. So I was wondering if you could put an asterisk or something like repeat, you have language on, it was on page 7 about non-city applicants, blah, blah, you know, it sort of explained a little more around the flexibility of that, really the intent, or either that or you put in that window where it's May 19th through dash blah, 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 you know, like make it a bigger window so it doesn't look like, well, if you missed May 19th, you gotta wait for next year.
Good point. I just changed the word due to recommended.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
But what you just pointed out is a really good point. So the next thing I'll talk about is the schedule here. May 19 being when the intent forms are due, because the purpose of that is to give me time to coordinate with other staff. The more time, the more, you know, if they need a study, we could possibly even commission a study before October. So it gives them more leeway, but as you point out, it does mean that they might get shut out of the process if.
So on page 7, if you go down to page 7, I think there was language that sort of said, no, maybe this is,
My
it was,
page
I
numbering
think,
hasn't changed from what you had.
bottom, please review. No, it was language about the intent forms being really meant to kind of, that non-city applicants are different than applications where you're trying to kind of partner a person with a city organization for like an open space project.
Yeah, I would echo Heather's concern. I think that in that first table, which is what people may really focus on, is have like even an asterisk and kind of really stress the language here. This is, you know, for non-city, you know, especially important for non-city, you know, residents that you know, where there needs to be, you know, this additional coordination. You know, just so that it doesn't discourage people that are just skimming it. And you know, because I'm not sure that changing it to just recommended as you did, well good. I'm not sure that's sufficient, because I don't know if, I think people will still focus on the date and not try to parse what does recommended mean.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to call the intent forms, say that they're optional for non-city applicants? Like in bold right there in the schedule?
They're optional if it's not a city-owned property, but it's not optional if it is a city-owned property.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would, like I said, I maybe put an asterisk right next to the May 19th date in the, in the left-hand column, just to really say, and then maybe have another box if you can have room for it, which is, this date is especially important for, non-city residents, just gonna paraphrase what you have in that step below, not necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
and just try and make it, seem like that's not a do or die.
Right.
Yeah.
For anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to identify, like to line this up against a calendar to see that all of these dates could work against the CPC schedule. Last year I tried to do that and I still ran into a log jam in the summertime and we had to rearrange the schedule. So hopefully that doesn't happen again this time. But I put right in the calendar that historic preservation projects need to schedule an advisory review with the HPC,
Yeah.
calling that out. And then eligibility determination forms, I'll get to my note after we go through this. Eligibility determination forms due mid-July. Full applications due mid-September. And then presentations in October. So this is moving the schedule a little bit earlier than last year's schedule was. Hopefully we don't end up in March still making decisions next year. And then November through December, hopefully the CPC is able to make its recommendations. And then we spell out January, it's going to City Council, and then grant agreements are executed, all in that table. So the trade-off, as you pointed out, is that having the eligibility determination stage is mandatory. If you don't get in the stream by mid-July, then you can't complete an application by for September. And so that both creates a barrier as well as, I mean, the downside is that it creates a barrier for people to get into the stream and apply, and it adds a layer of complication. The upside is that the more communication I have earlier on with applicants, the better I can support them through the application process. So, it might be that having 3 steps is too complicated, but it might be that going down to 1 or 2 steps would lose the benefit of signaling communication early on. So I just threw it out there. I don't know if, so most of you or all of you know that I chair the CPC in Medford. We're in the exact same situation with our funding cycle right now that you are. And at their meeting last week, the Medford committee voted that they want to do away with the eligibility determination forms altogether. They don't feel that it's helping them. So that triggered me to wonder whether Somerville were making the process too complicated, because we tend to make everything too complicated, or if the table as it reads is what works for us, and we'll just keep it the way that it is.
So it kind of begs the question is, you kind of said that, the eligibility return is due by, like 4:30 on July 14th. If a proposal which is eligible submits a complete application on September 15th, even if they haven't done that, are they eligible?
No, because the way that it is right now, the eligibility determination form is mandatory first step. So if they don't meet the May 19, yes, it's still eligible. But the July 14 deadline is a hard deadline.
So what's the relationship between the historic preservation meeting schedule, advisory review that has to occur, on the line above, and the eligibility determination? Because you've given them a window which extends beyond the July 14th date.
The reality is that the Historic Preservation Commission cannot always fit the CPA projects in our timeline. So what we had to do this past year was to say your project is eligible pending approval by the Historic Preservation Commission.
Okay.
And then when they got before we began our deliberations, the Historic Preservation Commission gave us a series of letters stating the eligibility of each of the projects. So we had to feed that into the stream after the applications were due.
Did Medford adjust the schedule for when a full application is due as part of their elimination of the eligibility determination?
Yes, actually, that is part of the context, is that they are discussing having a 2 application rounds next year. The meeting got to be too late, so they didn't finish that discussion about when the application rounds are going to be, but they want to break it into 2, whereas, and that was for a reason, being that where we both had an excess of requests over the amount that was available. So what they're having to do is break it into 2 and approve some of the next year, some of the projects in July after the turn of the fiscal year. So they're going to have a summer funding round and allow other people to get in line in the summer too, as well as a winter funding round like usual. So that's a different context, and that was one of the reasons why they talked about eliminating that step.
And I wasn't thinking that so much, because obviously I didn't know. But I was thinking, though, was what if we eliminated the eligibility determination form, but moved the full application deadline up by a couple of weeks, so that we give ourselves a few more weeks to be making the determination that they are indeed eligible, but not make it a 2-step process.
That would make sense. Yeah. It may be that just shortening the process altogether. So what that would do would be if your committee typically takes a recess in August. So a recess in August means that we can't have, so the full applications would have to be due in either July or September.
Mm-hmm.
July would be too early. So they would need to be due in August in order to move it up a few weeks. So what you could do is switch your recess month to July, and then you would be able to have August be when the applications are due. And then in September, you could have a preliminary review of all the applications, determine if everything is complete, if there's any information that you're especially looking for. And then in October, they present, and then you have 2 months to deliberate. But it is after 9:30. And so if this is too big of a decision to talk about changing your application procedure tonight, then I'm happy to leave it the way that it reads now, with the amendments, the edits that you've given me.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe we should take this. I mean, I think it's an interesting idea. I would defer to folks that have been on the committee longer with regard to how valuable they think the separate eligibility determination process is. I mean, I know I was on the committee when we went through it last year, but I was still very green. And similarly, I don't know whether we necessarily would need to then move the application all the way up to July, early July, so that we have them in time for an August meeting, or late July, so we have them for an August meeting, or would a September, end of July submission, and then us, presume that we're getting our first look at them at a September meeting. Is that give us enough time? I don't know. But those are the things I'm thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I would defer, I mean, most of the heavy lifting is being done by Roberta, I'm aware, so
Yeah.
I do want to put her view of what she needs to properly manage, the application very much. I'm inclined to defer to, to Roberta's view of how much time she needs to give us the information we need.
I would agree with
Yep.
that.
Yeah, me too. My sense was the eligibility forms, were more useful on some projects than others. For people that we needed more guidance than others in terms of retooling it or reshaping their approach. Roberta, what is your feeling about that?
The eligibility determination responses I could give when they submit the full application. So that could be like, I could say, I've received your full application. This is the response to your eligibility.
Yeah, I'm also wondering if we could merge the May 19th process with, folks that, and kind of encourage people where the eligibility is not a slam dunk, that they get involved earlier, in order to give us time to make an eligibility decision before they have to invest the time into completing an application.
Yeah, so actually what could happen is kind of goes back to the original two-part, but changing the purpose of the two-part application process is the May 19 would be for all applicants, not only the non-city applicants, and it would be recommended. And if you never submit the intent form, you can still submit a full application.
Right, so it's giving someone the opportunity, if they're sufficiently unsure whether they're even eligible and they don't want to go to the trouble to do a full application, they can go through that process. And I have to admit, I'm not sure. I don't know whether that's a much shorter process or easier process, but I'm presuming it's easier to do that than a full application. Again, I mean, I think that these are things that we should think about. I'm not suggesting we make a decision this evening.
Yeah, I guess I feel May 19th is too early to have a hard deadline because we do a lot of our tabling and outreach during the spring and summer, trying to encourage more diversity in our pool. And I'm hesitant to have something that's so early in the calendar year that would knock an applicant out.
Well, maybe the July, maybe a mid-July or sometime in July, later in the summer is kind of this voluntary submitted eligibility form, for folks that aren't confident that they are eligible.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a required deadline, but it's an opportunity for us to have an earlier look at, at potentially, dubious proposals. And leave the May 19th thing alone.
Yeah.
By leave it alone, you mean eliminate it?
No. I mean, leave it the way not that it's still the opportunity for folks out of town to, to coordinate with you to find partners if that's what they,
Mm-hmm.
just the way you're currently scoping it.
Yeah.
So based on where you're landing, we're kind of landing in the same place where we started. So what I might do is just retool the eligibility determination form a little bit, but still call it something different, because I think it will make it clearer for everyone.
The distinction I'm trying to make is that it's voluntary. It's not a required step.
Yes.
Okay, it sounds as though what I'm going to need to do is go back and retool this a little bit, put it in the meeting packet for next month. I was hoping to be able to release this early so that we could give people more time to be familiar with the application materials before the application period was due. But I think that we're going to need to look at it one more time, and I'll try to straighten this out based on the input that you've given me.
Yeah, and the other changes you described just generally, I think looked really good. I think the organization seems really good. Doing the 2-page, initial summaries and then the more detail.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think we are getting to a more user-friendly process, so we are getting there, and I think you're right that perhaps we need to just pick it up again next meeting to finish this.
Yeah, we didn't expect the Adam McGoon's house to take quite that long. That's part of my problem right now.
It was only 15 minutes, right? I saw it on the agenda.
I mean, I will say that whatever tweaking of the timeline we do should be heavily influenced by Roberta's feedback on how it works now, because as people said earlier, Roberta is the heaviest lifter and has probably the most insight because of that.
All right,
Okay.
well then I'll think about this and I'll make a recommendation, and hopefully the next time whatever I come up with looks good to all of you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Sorry for telling you that I have it all worked out and then throwing a big can of worms in the middle of it.
No, you did. I think I threw the can of worms.
All right, I think that covers all of the regular business. Other business that we had on the agenda are the FY23 calendar next steps. You can see in the calendar that I included in the meeting packet what's on deck for next month. Maybe I just want to take a look at it quickly. I didn't include it. I did not include the calendar in your meeting packet this time. We'll be receiving ahead of time annual reports from all of the grantees with existing projects or ongoing projects. And we won't have them come to the meeting, but we will be having a presentation by the Affordable Housing Trust at the meeting. And that's what I can recall. There may be some other things that pop up between now and then, but that's what we anticipate. And committee vacancies, I believe that at our next meeting, we will have Ryan Kirikoff starting with us. He's the new general public member who is taking Tatiana's place. And I believe that this may also be the last meeting that Dick is going to be with us, because you're going to be swapping in another member of HPC.
That's correct, although it's not clear whether it will, Eric will take over in April or whether it will be May.
Okay.
Definitely by May. The HPC asked if I would stay on through Adams Magoon house. Not uncomplicated, and I said, I don't know if it's going to get resolved in March or not. And having been through this meeting, I still don't know whether it got resolved in March or not.
I think that's true. I don't think it's, you know, we advanced it. I don't know that we resolved it.
So it seems not unlikely that it'll be back here next month. I'm assuming that by next month, it really will get wrapped
So
up
as
in it.
long as we don't resolve it, we have you.
That's something.
Thank you so much for your willingness to be a part of
Well,
this.
yeah, Dick, I hope that we do see you again. You've been a tremendous asset to the committee, and we really appreciate what you've brought to the table.
Thank you so much for saying that. It has been fun coming back after a few years. I think we went from in-person meetings at HPC to Zoom meetings with basically the same people. So there was a transition there. But when I left the CPC, it was the end of 2019 and everything was still in person.
Right.
So I still, most of you I have not met in person, which seems
Right.
odd to come and go and never get to meet you in person. So I hope that I will get to do that soon, whether or not we get Adams Magoon wrapped up in Eric.
Okay, great. And John, welcome to the committee. We like to do these marathon things, and hopefully they won't always run this late. But
Usually they don't.
yeah.
Who said that?
Not quite this late.
You're in a different time zone than me.
All right. Well, shall we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make it. Motion to adjourn.
Seconded by John.
I'll call the roll. Jahan,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
David,
I guess.
and Laura.
Yeah.
Night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Take care.
This one.